Thank you, Om Shanti, and welcome to you all this evening.
It's a very interesting topic and true to the organization's overall spirit where we are meeting. Sister Gopi, I am new in Kenya, and it's my privilege to be with you here in Brahma Kumaris to start this spiritual session. The topic, as we know, is related to mastering our own emotions, which prima facie seems to be impossible. But on that subject, Sister Gopi, we would first like to hear from you, as we have agreed on the format, that first Sister Gopi will address us for whatever time she would like to. And after that address, we will engage into interaction. I'll also invite questions, some questions from your side. And then again, we will hand over the floor to Sister Gopi for her concluding remarks. So, floor is yours.
Thank you, Rohitji. Honor to meet you, and I understand it's your 6th event today. So, big heart to be with us at the end of the day. And I also actually want to extend very deep appreciation to Sister Vedanti, who is the regional coordinator and the director of the Brahma Kumaris in Africa, and my own spiritual mother. From childhood, my association with the Brahma Kumaris. And I always feel like when we sit here today, we are some of our own person, but we are also the product of a lot of love and good wishes from a lot of people around us. And so, being in the midst of the hometown and one of the first events after the pandemic, I'm very appreciative and honored to be here today. And thank you to everyone. This is a big topic, but I thought maybe the place I could begin is my own experience. I was 8 years old when I had my first meditation experience in our headquarters in Mount Abu. And I was inducted into the meditation practice by 2 daddies, our elder sisters who are yogis. And one of them first came to us, and we were a group of children, and she said to us, if you want to become a yogi, then you have to learn to look after your mind. And your mind needs 2 things, love and law. And then the other daddy then gave us an exercise to discipline our minds. Right? She gave us a series of questions. We had to dialogue with ourselves and a little meditation practice. So off I went to the meditation room, and it was the first time I had a very deep experience of being in another world, literally. It was light, it was bliss, it was peace, it was otherworldly, so to speak. And it was a place that has no time. And I must have been sitting in that room for about 40 minutes. And the deep feeling of a connection with everything, everyone, with the Supreme. I must have been sitting for 40 minutes, and it felt like 2 seconds. And that experience and that taste of what I understood later to be meditation started to give me a different sense of self and perspective in life. So then began my human upbringing, my human development, because my body was growing. Became a child and a teenager, and as the human experiences kick in, there's a myriad of different emotions that kick in. There's fear, insecurity as a teenager, as you find yourself, as you find your place, you find where you fit in. There's excitement as things are developing. I lost my grandfather to lung cancer very early on. So sadness. There's disgust when something's not happening right. There's, fear, anger. And as I was starting to walk through many situations in my life, it was very clear to me, and started to become clear to me, that the human experience is something I have to walk through. It's part of the entropic process. I know we call it in physics entropy, but in the Vedic culture, we say energy has one of three forms, sato, rajo, tamo. Right? It's either inert, it's either in motion, or it's enlightened. So I started to realize, and plus, because I was studying every day and having meditation, it was like having to be in the emotion, learn my lesson, but realize this is not me. This is a feeling like I'm going through. And I realized that, the human soul and the human spirit is extremely resilient. In all the different areas and cultures I've traveled, and I've seen, the difficult histories of oppression, suppression, dictatorship, control. And yet, the human spirit has survived through such difficulty because where it's been oppressed, it's found a voice through art. Where the voice has been suppressed, it's found a voice through song and dance and culture. So there's always been a medium of the expression of the beauty of the soul, even against the backdrop of so much pain. And I know in my own journey through many challenging situations, either having to face the death, loss of loved ones, or having to face discrimination by moving to a new country and not quite understanding why they don't accept you and why you're being excluded and why you're being rejected. And yet in all of that, what I've observed in myself as a meditator, I would say, because I've had the advantage of starting early, is that when you have a practice of meditation, which is literally a practice of creating space for yourself, being with yourself, just detaching from the human experience every so often. Even an actor has to take off his clothes at the end of the day. He doesn't take his role to bed. He remembers who he is when he gets it back home. And it's the same thing. It's like when I understand deeply that I am more than just the human, I am a soul, I am a spiritual being. And when I come home to myself in that experience of peace, of love, of bliss, of joy, then I can be more objective about what's happening around me. And my intelligence starts to work for me. I remember being in the UK and being exposed to downright, now we would call it racism. In those days, I didn't have enough understanding of it. I was young. And I just thought, one day, if I don't understand what they're doing and why they're doing, then they don't understand what they're doing and why they're doing. And I remember our local meditation center was near my home. And every morning, I decided to take up half an hour. And in that half an hour, I thought, I'm just going to send good wishes. Because that's what I felt was needed. Just a lot of love was needed. And every day, half an hour, I would just say, just really send out lots of good wishes and light and hope they had a good day, and the people who were giving me a difficult time, and I don't know what difficulties they faced in their own lives. So I was just sending, and within a month and a half, the 3 people that gave me the hardest time turned around and became 3 of my best friends. And it was one of my first experiences about how the goodness in the human spirit can conquer anything. if you give it the space to emerge and have faith in it. And there's a very deep intelligence inside that works for us during times of pain and sadness and fear and all the human experiences we have in life. And if we listen to that intelligence, it can guide us out of anything. And I feel, mastering emotions has a lot to do with using your intelligence, your spiritual intelligence. And that is beyond the human dynamic of right and wrong. It's beyond polarity, because the human experience is very polarized. You have happiness, sadness, right, wrong, victory, defeat, praise, insult. And we go from one end to another. And you can spend your whole life doing that, and nothing ever changes. You keep recycling the same thing, same situations. But the spiritual experience isn't polarized. It just is. And it knows how to face something with understanding. Because if you can't understand yourself and understand another, then you will keep reacting. You will keep acting out. And what is an emotion? An emotion, being in an emotional state, is actually what I call in Vedic terms being in a rajasic state. It's about motion, energy in motion. And it is very much, emotions are a physiological experience. So excitement is an emotion. Deep happiness and joy is a feeling. Makes you content. But even the Chinese tell us excitement is not good for your heart. Because anything that moves your energies too much and makes you excited and makes you kind of disassociate from the reality of what's happening. So sustaining an emotional state isn't healthy long term. But somehow we go from one platform, from one emotion to another, because then we think that's life. Because we only know life through our five senses. And so, then we accept life as, well, yeah, bit of sorrow, bit of happiness, bit of this, bit of that. And we miss out on the intelligence and the wisdom of being content and satisfied. And we miss out on the lesson and the learning by accepting someone's part. I mean, if you feel you're a human, by nature, you will get addicted to the human experience. You will need a human experience. You will have to, plug into a human socket. You'll need people around you. You'll need social stimuli to make you feel things. And when I thought about why COVID happened, the drama of life is an incredible balancer. And COVID came with a big message in all of our faces. One of the biggest buzzwords in COVID was isolation. And I turned that into introversion. And it was literally, the whole thing was saying, look, stay at home, face yourself, go inside, sort it out. There's something not working in your life, in the way you're living your life. Reprioritize, refocus on your values. That was the message of COVID. And especially reclaim back your health and your mental health. And for many souls, this was difficult. Because if you're alone at home and you're cut away from all the human social stimuli that you're so used to having identified with, and you're suddenly by yourself, what do you do? How do you cope with your mind? Do you know your own mind? Do you know your own heart? Are you good friends with your mind? And if you're not, you're going to have a really hard time. So it was a major reality check, I would say. We've created glossy lifestyles, and the reality is something different. And for me, spirituality has always been a reality check. What's real here? And let me understand what's real here, rather than reacting because my human need isn't being met. A child, look at a child, normal. Child will cry because it's hungry. Your emotion kicks in because there's a physiological need that's not being met. Right? We are creatures as humans of attachment. A simple example, we sit on this chair. We get comfortable on the chair. We sit for half an hour. We'll go to the bathroom. And where are we going to come back to when we come back? To the same chair. Right? And then if somebody else is sitting there, what happens? You kind of have a thought, well, who's sitting in my chair?
Yes.
Well, you only sat for 20 minutes and suddenly it's your chair. There is a very deep illusion that we live in, that this is mine. And what I've discovered over many years of meditation, nothing is mine. Now, that was just a theory many years ago. But over decades of facing things, seeing the reality, it is absolutely real that even you don't take this body with you when you move on. So if the body is not yours, what else is yours? And I feel when we get to the bottom of that reality and we disable a lot of our attachments and the hype and the expectations that come with attachments, okay, now I can step back and I can see you for what you are, not for what I want you to be, which is what makes me emotional. My own expectation, my own desire defeats me in any relationship. You are never defeated by another person. You are only defeated by what you want from them. So for me, it's such a journey of keeping myself awake spiritually and nourishing that spiritual intelligence at a very fundamental level. And all of us have that core inside us. If we stop to give ourselves that time, that space to listen, to remember, to connect. And, I feel one of the things that has been important for me since childhood, to be able to, master emotions or come into a place where you're more in control of your feelings, is to become egoless. Humility is a hard lesson. It's a soft lesson, but it's a hard lesson too. It's a hard lesson if you're attached to your ego. And, over the years, as you develop as a young person, I think there is a certain amount of ego you need to hold because you suddenly have to prove yourself to get a job or to move on in life and, to grow. So you need the support of an ego. But inside, that's not really who you are. But somehow, to be socially accepted, you feed that dynamic inside you. And then you get to a point later on in your life when you have enough roles and stamps and, achievements and accolades and talents that you suddenly go, well, that's not really who I am. I'm something more than just this. And I feel what the spiritual journey and what spiritual intelligence does for a soul is it keeps them very natural. When I think of the naturalness of a baby, when we were born, the little baby born into this little body, this soul born into this body, was didn't come with the thought, I'm so tiny, who's going to look after me? This soul was born in full faith of itself. The moment it could move, it would crawl from end to end. It didn't care where it was. It would go to anybody. And the baby has fearless courage to look at you in your eyes and take love from you and give you love. And there's this naturalness of our spiritual being we have all experienced when we were babies. That we could easily be with each other, easily give and receive love. No, the baby isn't even aware of its gender, you know? And it's only later when it grows up that then everybody around it says you're black, you're white, you're green, you're gray, you come from this. You start getting all these tags and labels. Oh, you're a boy, you're a girl. And it's interesting, the moment you start to become conscious of these limited markers, you start to become insecure. So this little confident little baby that could go to anyone, that would just naturally express its purity and happiness, started to go, oh, well, who am I now? Oh, I'm a girl, I can't play with the boys. Oh, no, I'm supposed to do this. And suddenly you get this insecure teenager. And it's amazing how the bigger we grow in size, the more insecure we become. But we get very clever at hiding our insecurities behind our alter egos. Because the more insecure we are, the more we are driven to achieve, to prove ourselves.
No, we were so much immersed into the talk. Believe me, I mean, we didn't want you to stop, but it's just, and the mic system somehow gave you an opportunity to give us as an opportunity to ask you some questions and also reflect on what you have already said. Let me start with the last point you were making, Sister Gopi. Identifying yourself with what is not permanent. Me identifying with my clothes. 5 days every day wearing a suit, and then feeling that I am a person with suit. You wearing certain kind of clothes and identifying yourself with that particular nature of clothes, or your color of skin, or your profession. You identifying yourself as a spiritual guide, me as a diplomat, someone else as a student or as a painter. But what you said is right in overall spiritual perspective, that I am not a painter, I am not a teacher, I am something more. So how do we disassociate ourselves from this created identity, which we know inside that it's not permanent? It's something that we have created over the period of time, and at certain period of time it is going to be again disassociated from ourselves. Let's say a teacher who joins a job, he likes to be called sir or madam in his school and sometimes also in families and friends. But that's for how long? Maybe 30, 35 years. What happens when the person is no more a teacher? Similarly, a leader, political leader, or a business leader, identifying themselves so much with the created identity, position, and responsibility, and then at the end, I'm sure you are understanding what I'm going to say, at the end when they retire, then suddenly feeling a vacuum in their life. Very difficult for them to disassociate with that created identity, and then sometimes going into depression. So how do we remain careful, all of us, that what we are doing is just part of our existence? It's neither the only purpose and is nor the only identity we should carry with us. So that carefulness and continuous awareness, what you said, spiritual awareness and spiritual intelligence, how do we create and keep that in our mind constantly, because the fear is, when you live in this world, you encounter a number of emotions. There are many factors which solidify this identity in your mind, and you are bound to sometimes forget that you are not what you believe yourself to be. So how to remain constantly aware of that fact?
That's a really good question. Thank you. As you were speaking, I was remembering the mother, because that's a role that when the child can think and talk and walk and make decisions for themselves, at some point they don't want a mother anymore. They don't want somebody else. And then the mother feels redundant. Well, what do I do now? What do I do with my life now? And I think very early on, one of the spiritual teachings I was exposed to was it's about balance. You know, in my experience of life, whatever it is that I'm exposed to and I get a chance and an opportunity to do is separate from who I am. And actually, if I enrich who I am, I get better at what I do. I learned that very early on, and staying balanced in that was very important. Because, you know, in our line of work, we can talk about knowledge a lot. We can get very enlightened, but if we're not deeply connected to ourselves, then we have an expression in Hindi, Abhiman seva ka naam lekar ke apna kaam karta hai. You know, the ego can take the name of service and get its job done. So I had to calculate for myself, how much time and attention did I need to give myself to stay true to myself, especially to keep my feelings clean. That was a priority. So when I say balance between being and doing, you know, when you get absorbed in doing something, it gives you the excitement, it gives you a pull, it gives you a buzz, it gives you... And I thought, that's an emotion, and it's good, it has its time and place, but I have to detach from it and come to a place of zero and peace inside. So I balance out my sense of self. Otherwise, that emotion pulls me more into the role. And before I know it, without that buzz, I can't survive. I need the drug to survive, you know? And then I get burnt out because I'm not serving anymore. I'm taking from what I'm doing. So the balance means you need to develop some discipline in your life to give yourself that time. You know, in our Bharat culture, we talk about the early morning hours of nectar, Amrit, Mahotsav. It's, you know, Brahma Muhurat. It's very important that time of the morning to connect with yourself, to connect with the Supreme. And even science is now verifying that what you do when you wake up in the first 15 minutes of your day, whatever thoughts you create and feelings you create, they create your mood for the whole day. So science is telling us now that wake up early and create the best thoughts and feelings. Create the space for yourself to be with yourself, because once your mood is set, you work on autopilot for the rest of the day, right? And when your mood is like your armor, it's like a vibrational armor around you. Now, we all know the power of a good mood. When you're in a good mood, even if it's raining, it's okay. You know, you can move. Chale, we keep a positive outlook. But when you're in a bad mood, it's like even if the sun is shining and you'll find fault with everything. And so I think for ourselves, we need to understand what a balanced life is. And somewhere we've lost that ability. And we don't actually have an education in our society.
True.
I was in Brazil recently, and I was talking to a lady who actually works for she's a lawyer working for the Ministry of Labor Law in Brazil, in Sao Paulo. And she was saying that she was educated as a child. The reward, the carrot and stick, just hold a carrot. If you do this, you'll get a reward. So everything is transactional. All our relationships from childhood, you're taught, is a transaction. You will get something if you do good. Not that you do good because you are good. And that's the difference between a virtuous life and a life in which you buy your freedom and buy your peace and buy your happiness and buy your love, So I feel each soul has to spend time with their conscience, with their heart, to deeply understand the pulse of how they move inside. How they feel, on what basis do they make decisions, what are my values that are important for me. Many years ago, because I work a lot with young adults in the movement for the last 27 years, and we had the good fortune in Delhi to have a meeting with Sonia Gandhi in her residence. There was a group of, I think we had 22 young leaders from all over the world. And we were invited to her birthday, and we had a chance to meet her. And one of them asked her a question. On what basis do you make decisions? Because she was a very reluctant leader as an individual on the Indian political scene. And she just went quiet, and she said, I've made friends with my conscience.
Interesting.
And I make my decisions on the basis of my conscience. So it's not that because the party was asking her she has to be leader, the society was saying this is what she has to do. She wasn't making decisions on the basis of the expectations of people around her. But she was connecting with something deep inside her. And I feel that our conscience is the doorway to our wisdom. And that when we actually become conscientious in our life, we can become more, regulated. We don't get drawn into the push and pull. Just because the crowd is going this way, we run in that direction. You understand? So what I've realized is that because I have a practice of staying balanced inside, staying focused on myself, then it's easier for me to be able to be more objective and voice what I feel, voice my ideas. And if they're accepted, great. If they're not, I wait. I don't have to push it. It's maybe not the right time. Now, the other question I often get asked is, okay, but sister, how is it possible to be spiritual in this world? And, is it possible to give yourself this attention? We have so much to do in our lives. And again, I come back to this faculty of attention inside each of us have. When something is a priority for us, we make sure we do it. When we love something. If you think about a mother and they have a newborn baby in their arms, okay, they're going about the household, they're cooking, they're cleaning, they're doing their job, they're going shopping, but they've got the baby in this arm. And at no point when they're cooking or doing whatever do they forget they have the baby, drop the baby and say, oh, I was so busy, I completely forgot I had a baby in my hands. Has a mother ever done that? No way. This little thing is more precious than life, So if you love something, we all have this faculty of giving attention. So do what you need to do, know how to do it, come back, exchange love, go out. And so this tiny little soul inside is like a baby. It needs attention. And you just have to stop for a minute and just go inside and just settle into a state of loving peace. Settle into a state of good feeling for 1 minute and then come out and bring that beautiful energy out into what you do. And, in Japan, they have this, they call it Kaizen.
Yes.
It's continuous improvement, and it's based on the 1 minute principle, that you fix, if you want to master anything, you fix 1 minute, maybe a few times a day, but you fix the time and just 1 minute, and you just practice it for 1 minute. And slowly, as you practice just being with yourself for a moment, every day, every so often, you start regulating everything, your whole system. You're not driven anymore, you're not pulled anymore. You're much more content inside and focused. Does that make sense?
No, that makes lots of sense, in fact. And but that drives us to more questions. And I mean, you mentioned like creating good mood in the Brahma Muhurt, and in that way taking the control of your day rather than the situations taking control of your day and you reacting to that. So that's a good example, and if I have to extend that to the whole life and whole approach, I'll again elaborate on that. That if let's say, someone does not have that meditation or introspection time in the morning, and they just launch themselves in the daily activity, and something happens, let's say traffic or something else, and they are delayed, so that emotions drive their whole day, and they are out of the control of their day. That's what you were saying. But when we say that these emotions or these inputs, let me put in this word, inputs coming out, stimuli coming from the world around us, and we constantly reacting to them with trained responses, and we have certain trained responses. Whenever some input comes to our one of the 5 sense organs, either we like them or we dislike them. If we like them, we'll try to get more of them. If we dislike them, we try to be away from there. And that's what keeps us running throughout our life. I don't want this, I want this. And whatever we want, we are struggling to get that more. And when we try to get that more, if we again don't get it, again we don't like that experience of not having that. So again we dislike that situation. So this constant liking, not liking, having, not having, and then reactions to them, I mean, this is something which perhaps is one of the best example I would like to get your answers on or your comments on, that how does one reduce the attachment to this liking and disliking? It's impossible to stop the inputs by living in this world. You said that we all live in this world. We don't have the luxury of renouncing this sansar. So being in this sansar, is it possible, one, to isolate yourself even in your own space where there are no stimulus, no stimuli, inputs, so that you don't react? Or there is what you said, balance. There is better way of explaining that, where we receive the inputs but we don't react in the way we are reacting today, so that we are better trained. You have guided us that we need to balance. I would like to have some more ideas on how do we implement that process.
Okay. What I understand these so-called tendencies, reactive tendencies, and I know in the world, when they've studied human behavior, they've identified 4 common types of reactive behavior. When we're in situations and we're experiencing emotions we don't like. One is withdrawing completely, the tortoise, just checking out, mentally, emotionally disconnecting, running away from it. If you can't cope with it, close the door, run.
Yeah, escape. Tendency.
The second reactive is the shark, attack. It's like attack is the best form of defense. If you don't like something, attack it, remove it, get it out of the way.
Offense, yeah.
The third is the teddy bear response. It's the people-pleasing response. It's like, let's try and make everybody happy, but I'm completely out of touch with my own feelings. And I'm so engrossed in making everybody happy so that harmony can be had that I forget how I feel, and eventually I explode, carry the weight of the world. And then the fourth one is the intellectual response, where you need to rationalize, make a story about why something is the way it is. And all of these reactive tendencies are coping mechanisms. We're trying to cope because we don't like the way we're feeling right now. And I would just call these attachments habits. They're habits because we haven't had an education in responding differently. So we've just developed bad habits. It's really simple. And you know, in psychology, how do you change a bad habit? You replace it with a good one. Somebody comes to me and says to me, "Sister, how do I stop getting angry?" I said, well, if you keep that as an aim, that's going to be a very difficult thing to do, because in neuroscience, your whole brain is processing that aim as get angry. It's the word anger is still in your aim. So you're going to keep recycling your anger. But why don't you convert that aim to how can I develop more peaceful and a more stable sense of being? Then life will start to support you with that. Your brain accepts that as a prediction. And when it starts to accept a peaceful and a stable mind as a prediction, eventually the neurons that fire because of habits, habitual responses, they start to disable in your body. So the first step is a shift of aim in your life. From a negative-based aim to a positive one. The second is literally creating good habits. Because good habits support us to stay above things. Now, all of us have to face our lot. When I say that, our own karmic soup. Each one has their own unique karmic predicament that is unique for them. And it's there because you have to settle something to come to a place of realization and freedom in yourself. So that's your lot. Don't complain about it. But instead of reacting to it, the one habit that spirituality and meditation has taught me that I found very helpful is the habit of being a detached observer in life. Now, this is what Raja Yoga teaches us. Yoga means connection. It's a sadhana of the intellect, Buddhi Yoga. It's training your mind and intellect to concentrate on higher principles, to live from a higher position. So when you practice Raja Yoga, you're literally repositioning yourself again. So instead of being in Hindi we say khilari, a player in life, you learn how to take a balcony view. You learn how to switch from being a player one moment to being on the balcony the next, watching the play. So you can be separate from the dynamic to see what's going on and to see yourself in it, right? So the practice of the detached observer is something cultivated only through yoga and meditation. I mean, there are so many different types of sadhana that meditation and yoga teaches us. And when we have these habits, learning how to be a detached observer, then very quickly you can reposition yourself. And that habit helps you manage things. It's good habits that keep us away from bad habits. Otherwise, if we don't create any good habits, our bad habits consume us. You know, so I would say meditation isn't a luxury anymore. It is an absolute necessity. It's oxygen for the soul, where we need to understand very deeply how we need to be in our lives. And the moment that's programmed into your buddhi, You know, your intellect is like a kaleidoscope. You know, one of those things you kind of focus in and it's got a beautiful design on the end of it. But before it's just all blurry. So most of us go through life with a very blurry vision of ourselves. So that's why we feel invaded by things outside us. But when we spend time with ourselves and we really feel and see ourselves, our beauty, we see ourselves through God's eyes. That very subtle perception means that we don't take on other people's perception of us. I tell you, 80% of the game is there.
Very interesting. No, I think this is very, very useful. Useful in the way that how we reposition ourselves in the situations where we are. And that's why our reaction would differ from what we have been doing to what we would like to do henceforth, by way of remaining a bit detached. Slowly maybe, may not be easily implementable, because we still identify ourselves with something. We have certain ego inside us. When someone says us something, we have tendency to react in certain way. But by what you are saying, I mean implementing that, perhaps we can take a pause and think whether we need to react in that way. And perhaps that one moment will guide us that no, you don't need to, because you are unnecessarily identifying yourself with your ego or with your position,
Yes.
which is actually not a permanent thing.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think if implemented rightly, perhaps this would be very interesting way of looking at all the stimuli in our life and changing our reaction in day-to-day life. Difficult task, but maybe good lesson for us. You mentioned, Sister Gopi, about meditation not being a luxury in today's world, but a necessity. I'd like to relate it to the modern age where we are living. You see, we have progressed a lot. We are no more afraid of anything in the world. Even countries have prepared themselves for aliens attack. So there is no external threat which we are afraid of. So if I have any problem, I would find solution in technology. Even the COVID, which was unprecedented, in less than 1 year or so, we had found some vaccine for that. We had solution. But this modern age has not taught us how to control our inner problems. So if there is, let's say, severe cold, I would have central heating in my house and I can sleep peacefully. If it is extremely hot, I can have AC in my house. I can still sleep peacefully. But if a thought goes in my mind when I am on the bed, perhaps that thought will not allow me to sleep peacefully.
Exactly.
How to control that? And we, in ancient time, perhaps we were more into that education. Now in the modern age, we have gone into developing everything which is related to our external aspect, but we somewhere forget what pertains to the inner aspect. And that education is required. And what you were mentioning is somewhere correct on that line. So we would like to seek your guidance on this particular aspect, as how to educate ourselves to, again coming back to that, our mastering our own emotions and controlling our own inner aspects.
I feel we give a lot of importance to our thoughts. And actually, I would like to maybe introduce the idea that thought is nothing. It is everything, but it's nothing as well.
Interesting.
Because what is the seed of thought? If you even follow the thread of thought back to its essence, there is an energy. the frequency of energy. You know, the Atma, the soul, is a spiritual being, a Shakti, a Chaitanya Shakti, a living energy. And it's a bit like, see this light? You see the light, but you don't see the current of energy behind it. But when that current of energy hits the filament, you get light, and you see the light. So thought is the light, but the current is the energy of the soul behind it. So if you want to start to control, or I would say develop more controlling power, because sometimes we say, I want to control over this country. You can't control anything external, but you can develop more controlling power inside. Then I have to take myself back to the source and the essence of who I am beyond thought, which is Atma. And the moment I relocate myself to that experience, then suddenly my life is connected at a different level. You see what you have to do, you know what you have to do, you don't think about what you have to do. It's the alter ego that brings thoughts because it needs to create and achieve and go out and do something. But when you step beyond thought into the essence of who I am as a soul, suddenly, we say in Hindi, man aman banta hai. Very peaceful. And you can't ever stop your thoughts because it's natural. But what you start doing, because you're connecting with the energy source, you can then, from that frequency, a different kind of creative thought emerges. So if you're located at the human experience, it's anger, emotion, your thoughts are ruled by that. If you're located in the spiritual experience, your thought process is completely different. You understand?
I'm getting it.
So we don't have to worry about our thoughts too much, but the kind of thoughts that are going through your mind are like data. It's just data. It's telling you that you're located in the wrong place. Your sense of self is dislocated. So go back to yourself. And that's why I feel like over many years in meditation, I've observed the mental thought processes. And I've observed 4 categories of thoughts. One, a negative. We're all very experienced in negative thoughts. You know, whether they're thoughts that come from essentially just manipulating our human experience. Greed, anger, jealousy, vengeance. You know, manipulation of trying to get what we want, selfishness. And these thoughts, they're like robbers. They don't come in 1 or 2s, they come in tsunamis. So if you let even one of those thoughts in, they will destroy your happiness and your contentment. And you know, all of us, if you've noticed in your own mind, there is always a moment where your conscience speaks and there's a space where you know you're overreacting a bit, yeah. But we don't listen to that space. We jump into the spin. And then we are subject to Murphy's Law, which is what has gone wrong, must go wrong, will go wrong, has to go wrong. If the domino of your thoughts has fallen this way, sorry, you have to go around that way and you're going to have to experience the pain and suffering because you let yourself let that thought in. So what meditation does when you practice it, especially in the early morning hours, you achieve stopping power, breaking power. As you learn to apply the full stop, you learn to become essenceful, pull all your energy inside, be the Atma. You develop the ability to be essenceful and to apply the full stop. And then you just say, no, this is not the road I'm going, literally. Negative thought, you do not analyze, and you do not have a conversation with these thoughts because there is no reason for them. You know, you can't reason with them. The second category is waste. Unnecessary thoughts. You're sitting, you're letting your imagination wander. Doubt is a waste of thought. Worry It's like your imagination's playing with perceived things that haven't even happened yet. We sit in a train or a bus and we're looking at each other's clothes and what handbag they're wearing and what hairstyle they're, prejudice and judgments, waste of time. And we waste so many of our precious resources, our time, our thoughts, our energy. And that wastage creates a subtle burden inside. And eventually, the body has to, जैसे क्या कहते हैं, भोगना पड़ता है ना. It comes out through illness or it comes out through dizziness or I'm not feeling well today. It's a burden of waste. And then the third category are ordinary thoughts. And these are thoughts linked to your responsibilities, whatever role you play in your life. These are necessary thoughts, because you have a responsibility to fulfill. But even with those, whatever you need to do today, just generate the amount of thoughts you need to finish that today. No more.
No more.
If you've been with somebody and they say, I have to do this, 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 you get tired listening to them. And then by the time they finish the list of what I have to do, they're too tired to even do it. So it's like the analysis creates paralysis. So know what you have to do, write it down, and focus on it. And then the fourth category are our positive thoughts, our well wishes. When we just sit and give good wishes, when did you last do that? When you sat and literally just thought of someone's speciality, sent them light, love, good wishes. These thoughts are slow, but they create a very deep sense of peace and contentment inside. So now, if you look at these four categories and you ask yourself, just in one day, in which category was most of my thoughts today, then you'll realize
We know the answer.
where yeah, exactly. So I feel that thoughts are a data, but they're not everything, because the creator of thoughts is more powerful, the soul.
Interesting. So I would term it as like thought management process. Yeah, because you understand the origin of the thought. That's what you said, Sister Gopi, is the energy. And we have to take a step back. Don't attach yourself with the thoughts. Manage them. And then go one step back and relate yourself to the energy. And maybe, perhaps, this will guide us in managing our thoughts and taking more positive thoughts than the negative ones. And of course, most of us have heard the term law of attraction. It's something like what you have been saying. Sister Gopi, at this stage, I would also like to have one or two questions from the audience, if you
Yes,
would.
please.
So, anyone from the audience? Yes, please.
One question. Is it question time?
Yes.
All right. Wonderful talk. Thank you very much. Forgiveness. All of us go through life with a lot of hurts around us. A lot of people hurt us, yeah? And we use the tool of forgiveness to look like a better person or whatever, yeah? I would like you to please give some insight into how much forgiveness should one extend when the time is needed.
Okay. So the question was about forgiveness, and I'm just repeating it for those online. And we go through a lot of hurts in our life, and how much should we forgive? Good question. Thank you. I feel it's an important one, because I feel this ability to forgive helps us to eventually master our emotions, actually.
Exactly.
In our Eastern philosophy, we understand everything as cycles, right? Everything is a cycle. Time is a cycle. The human processes are cycles. In the West, everything's linear, right? So when I talk about, in this word forgiving, the word giving, giving is receiving. Receiving is giving. There is no separation. It's one and the same thing. And when I had a very difficult moment in my life, when I was rejected, excluded, isolated, it was a difficult pill to swallow, to know that whatever I am receiving now, I have given at some point. Maybe not in this life, in one of my lives. Get my point? So you're never forgiving someone, because if you look at giving and receiving as a line, then it's like someone is superior giving and someone is taking. It's not a straight line. It's a cycle. It's one and the same thing. So you need a lot of, and to get to a point of forgiving yourself, you need to accumulate a lot of power in yourself, good feelings for yourself, to come to that reality that actually I'm sitting in this soup and whatever I'm receiving, I've given. And then coming to that deep realization of forgiving yourself for having hurt another human soul. The human soul is so precious, it's so soft, it's so pure. And that we have all had tendencies of violence. And when you deeply sensitize to that, and you forgive yourself and you say, I am sorry for ever having given any of this to any human soul from the heart, then you know what happens? You get help from God. I feel a lot of God's love enter your heart, because that moment where you disable the ego of needing to be right, the ego of needing to have a position, and just realizing in a humble heart that I am receiving what I've given. I want to stop this cycle here now. Now I want to give love. Then what happens in that humility? The person, the event, it disengages out of your awareness. And you realize it was never about them anyway. They were just a trigger.
Yes.
It's all about you. And reconciling your own story to bring yourself back to being an ocean of love and compassion. And people only hang out in our awareness because we haven't learnt the lesson. They're mirroring something for us. And so when you give time to yourself, like giving yourself time in the morning and in the evening before you sleep, and beginning a very deep conversation with God, then you can slow everything down to do this deep work and to keep yourself soft, to let God become blotting paper, because really God's presence is there, but we don't give ourselves time to clean ourselves with these realizations. So I say, forgiving myself for my mistakes, realizing them, not holding them against me, because if I don't realize that, then I can't tolerate anybody else's mistakes, and that's when I keep taking hurt.
I think I would narrate an incident, or rather, there is a movie, Up in the Air. So that's George Clooney's movie, and in that movie, he gives a presentation. He says it's a backpack. So whatever burden we are carrying with ourselves, let's say you have a house. So house is a burden on your backpack. Why? Because the lighter the backpack, more your freedom happens. So if you have a house owned somewhere, a car owned somewhere, these are all weight on your backpack, and they will prevent you from moving ahead, because you will think of, if you want to, let's say, go from Kenya to India, you will first think of selling that house, managing that car. So the more you add to your backpack, that becomes your restriction. And similarly, forgiveness, these emotions can also become some restrictions and weight on your backpack. The more you want to keep your backpack, heavier your backpack, maybe you can keep not forgiving people, or keep these negative emotions. I mean, that's how I would rephrase it. So it's much better what you are saying, Sister Gopi, is that shed the load every day morning, whatever negatives we have, keep discarding them so that your backpack is lighter and you can move free and in the direction where you would like to go. Maybe we can take one more question, Sister Gopi, from
Sure.
audience, maybe from one from ladies.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, how to control time, maybe that can. Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes. Just one more thing to add, and maybe I can take you in, we can go into a guided experience of this, is patience. One of the biggest lessons in life is to learn patience. And that patience comes from being peaceful with yourself. And then, we say in Hindi, Shanti se kaam lena hai. In everything, Shanti se kaam lena. When you have patience, you can wait with yourself. Because when your karmic accounts are being settled, you have to wait. You walked yourself into a difficulty. You have to walk yourself out. So you walk yourself out patiently. So sometimes we have to have patience with ourselves. But always keep the higher conversation with God going. Because that conversation gives us spiritual intelligence and gives us the power to then let go. That's why we say, let go and let God. And that relationship then restores this lateral relationship. If you don't go vertical, you will never be able to manage your human relationships. Yes. Okay. So thank you for being such a receptive audience. So shall we just sit up straight as we step into an experience? It's been a long day. So I'm going to invite you. I know the tendency in meditation is to close your eyes, but maybe just leave them open and rested in front of you, because if you close your eyes, your mind will wander off and you might fall asleep. And I'll just share some thoughts and then let's go on a journey. And if your mind wanders off in between, it's okay, just bring it back. Okay? All right. So just take a couple of deep breaths. In through your nose, hold it, and then exhale slowly. And just feel all this oxygen entering your body, filling the cells in your body. And as you breathe in a sense of peace. And as you breathe out, allow any tension in your body to release from your feet, your legs, your stomach, your hands, your shoulders. And just let your breathing settle into a gentle rhythm. Focus on that breath. And come to a sense of being present in this moment now. And appreciating this moment now. And now follow your breath to its source. There is a deeper, subtle energy inside, a current of energy that's making this body breathe. An intelligent energy that's animating this body, giving it life. It's a very subtle current of energy. Just feel it. And now visualize all this energy rising up through your legs, up through your chest, up through your arms, and concentrating behind the eyes into a star of light. This energy, when it's gathered, is a living being. It's who I am, the soul. And as you let all this energy concentrate behind these eyes, and you start letting yourself feel lighter. The body feels like a costume. And I, the soul, am the living energy that gives life to this body. The body is like a temple. And I, the soul, am a living flame in the temple of this body. Allow yourself to become concentrated in light. And then say to yourself 3 times in your mind, very slowly, I, the soul, am a living being of peace. I, the soul, am a living being of peace. I, the soul, am a living being of peace. Feel the vibration of peace. Fill your mind. And as this sense of peace deepens, we can step beyond these 5 senses. And we can open our minds and hearts to another light, the supreme light. A soul just like us, but supreme in all its qualities. An ocean of peace, an ocean of love. The eternal parent of this eternal soul. And as I step out of this limited human experience into eternity, the eternal bond that I, the tiny soul, have with the Supreme. I start to experience safety, security, stability, and fear finishes. Whatever I am, however I am, I belong. Connecting with God's light, I allow this light to enter my being. I allow the love to fill my mind. And I let myself become a lighthouse of peace and love. And I let these vibrations reach out into the world, holding the world in a loving embrace. And all the time, I remain aware that as I come home to myself, that act of self-service serves the world. And now, allow yourself to feel your body once again and slowly open your eyes, raise your eyelids and look out in front of you. And just be aware of yourself inside. And know that who you are is a gift to the world. Om Shanti.